Hello and welcome back to Radio Free Urbanism, a podcast about urbanism and stuff. I am delighted to be here with three delightful, wonderful, and handsome people. Let's start off with Ethan Myers.
Welcome back, everybody. It's so great to be here on this wonderful show. Thank you for introducing me, Alex.
You're so welcome. And, I'm going to go with Nick next, but I'm going to go Nicholas, our guest. Welcome onto the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And Nick, our regular Nick.
Yeah.
Nick
Glad to be
Laporte.
back, guys. It's always good to be here on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's a nice treat. And if you want to join us on Wednesday and be here for the live show, just like Jen and Skitch are right now, you can go to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism and become a patron for as little as $1 a month. And that goes to support the show. We don't currently get paid enough on Patreon to take any money out and use it for anything other than the software we use. So the support is appreciated, and it's always nice to have people like these in the live chat to interact with us and ask questions and stuff.
Alex,
Yeah,
how much does it take to join this chat?
it takes $1 a month.
$1.
Yeah, and absolute fealty. But we don't enforce the last part. Just the $1 is expected. Don't worry. But yeah, Nicholas, tell us about yourself. Tell us how you wound up on this show. Give us the Coles notes, maybe a couple minutes here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I go way back with the other Nick, back to the days of Kingsville, Ontario, and we met up not that long ago in Windsor, where I am currently, and had a great conversation about urbanism, and he asked me if I could be on the show, and I was really into that. I'm living in Windsor. I'm an architect, licensed in Ontario and licensed in Michigan, and I work in downtown Detroit for a small architecture firm called SDG Associates.
I love that. Nick, our regular Nick. Is there anything we should know about Nicholas, or any questions you want to bring up now, or what do you want to save for later?
Well, yeah, just like to highlight the stuff that you do on social media, your Instagram page. So can you talk about that and how, originally it started, well, it's called Atelier Lamoureux, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
originally
exactly.
started mostly design stuff that you posted there, but as you kind of scroll through, we get closer today, there's a lot more urbanism stuff that pops up. So can you just tell me about how you kind of got more interested in urbanism?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the earlier stuff was me kind of just figuring things out and really just messing around. And what my career has kind of spun into is there's a lot of issues in downtown Detroit and downtown Windsor. And I've really tried to get as involved as possible with local organizations, nonprofits, and just groups that are passionate about making these cities better places. One in particular is the Jane's Walk Festival in Windsor, and Activate Transit Windsor. They're both, local groups really trying to make a difference. The Jane's Walk festivals have been awesome. It's a bunch of people like yourselves kind of getting around, walking around the city, nerding out about urbanism. And last year I did a walk on Zoning 101, just trying to teach people in Windsor just the basics of zoning, which, it's something a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but it's extremely important, and it really governs the way that our cities are put together. So it's been fun. I'm liking being in Windsor. There's always stuff to do, and always things that need to be improved.
Yeah, I really like that you're doing this education work on like how things are built and why they're built the way they are and all of this sorts of thing. And you as an architect have a particular insight that the rest of us who experience the cities in different ways, and usually just as a user of the city rather than as kind of an active designer of that city, you have specific insight into these kind of complicated documents. I'm constantly hearing from my friends who are architects about the little weird, frustrating things that they find in our land use bylaw here in Calgary that make no sense to them. And they're like, if we took that one sentence out, I could do it this way, which would be better for the community, better for the user, and a more beautiful structure as well. So I'm excited to get a little bit more into that sort of thing later in the show. I know we've already got some questions lining up for you here. Nick, do you have anything else you want to ask Nicholas before we move on, or do you want to jump right into CES?
I think we're going to touch base on a lot of the things that you've already alluded to here in the intro, and I'm excited to get into it, but I think we can kind of really dig in a bit later in the show.
Perfect. Take us away, Nick.
For the updates, what do we got here? Oh yeah, I got back from CES last week, and I said I would talk a bit more about it. There's not a lot more to say. I spent the next day just trundling around CES a bit more and kind of looking for anything I could find, but I did connect with a few different micromobility companies, especially InMotion, and they're known for their electric unicycles. So I might be doing some stuff with them and kind of taking the kind of utilitarian angle when it comes to riding these things. I've never ridden one. Hopefully in the next few months, I'm going to figure out how, because they still kind of freak me out. But yeah, there was great companies there like Apollo, VMAX, like I said, InMotion, tons of e-bikes I've never heard of, but I've got to check those out as well. But I just still can't believe how big CES is. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It's just, it just doesn't make sense that there isn't better public transportation. Like, this happens every year. The Las Vegas Convention Center is absolutely massive, and it takes place not just there, but in other places as well. Like, you literally have to take an Uber to get to like the Venetian Hall or something like that. And I regret to say that I didn't check out the Hyperloop. I didn't even know where to look for that. But maybe next time.
That's must be some expert level wayfinding for it then.
Tragic. Tragic.
Yeah. It's like, it is an interesting case because everywhere else, like connecting mass transit to their convention center, every other city's like, yeah, we got to do that. It's a must. But Vegas has missed the boat, I guess.
Yeah. The monorail exists, but I don't know how useful that is.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, do you have a thing?
I do have a little bit of an update here. So the wonderful people over at Bike Bus Portland had another little celebrity cameo. So Coach Balto, the guy who sort of runs Bike Bus at the moment, invited celebrity Justin Timberlake to attend the Bike Bus out here in Portland. And it became kind of a little bit of a just a little bit of a thing that happened out here. You can see him riding along with some of the students going to class, and
that's awesome.
It's really all about these little celebrity connections, and showing people who have no involvement in urbanism that it's a way to get around. And doing things like this normalizes activities like riding your bike.
Yeah, it's crazy that riding a bike needs like celebrity appearances to just help normalize it, when it's like it's a simple machine. It's incredibly uncomplicated, and it's fun, and people of almost all ages can participate in this activity. So it's exciting to see, but it is crazy that it has to become like this, like crazy.
It's crazy that the culture got to this point.
Yeah, exactly. Skitch says, Jamie says that this is urbanism by chance. I'm trying to translate.
I couldn't parse that either.
I'm trying to exposing people to urbanism. Yes. Yeah. It's like, it's their gateway into it. It's like this
first look.
Yeah. Come ride your bike with us. And then it's like, oh my goodness, bikes are the best. And then suddenly Justin Timberlake has bike lanes named after him.
And then suddenly he has a copy of Jane Jacobs' The Life and Death of American City.
Yeah. And he's seen on the train reading the what's that? What's the book called? The High Cost of Free Parking. Yeah, incredible.
Honestly, this can move the Overton window. It's incredible. I remember Beyonce talking about it. She's saying like on her days off, she would just like go for a bike ride with like some of her assistants or whatever, and people would like see her. And I'm sure celebrities have that thing where they see somebody sees them and they know that they see them, but at the same time they're like, oh, it can't be Beyonce. She won't be riding a bike. And by the time they realize it's her, she's gone. She's on a bike.
Yeah. There was another big thing of Tyler the Creator riding his bike around New York City as well too. That kind of popped off a few months ago.
Yeah. It's like it's cool. It is really cool. Sketch Ads. Urbanism by Chance is also the name of Jamie's podcast. So go listen to Urbanism by Chance. Jamie was a guest on the show.
Did you not mention that, or is this brand new? We didn't hear about this.
I don't know. Like I feel like I should know about this. I'm embarrassed.
It's a pretty new show. I will say that I've heard about it.
Okay, it's new-ish. Okay, well, I'm gonna go listen to it after the show as penance. I feel embarrassed.
Good show.
I apologize, Jamie. I'm looking forward to it. All right. Anything else to say on the bike bus?
Let's get some more celebrities.
Yeah. Everybody should just start inviting local celebrities out to their bike buses and events. I just wanted to give a quick Green Line update. I don't want to spend. Well, I've spent so much time talking about the Green Line on this podcast. I feel like
Green Line.
What is
what exactly? What Green Line? That's what we're all wondering. I'll link in the show notes a live wire article where Mayor Gondek is talking about there's some chance here. Things are progressing. We'll hopefully have something figured out. Everything to do with the federal election kind of throws an extra wrench in things. Our federal funding kind of expires at the end of March. So we'll get there. We'll get there. I'll link the article, and hopefully the conversations with the provincial government go well. Now we're going to get on to the stories. Nicholas, if you want at any time, jump into the conversation, interrupt us, share your thoughts on things. We want to hear from you. People want to hear from me less. So please speak as much as you'd like to. But our first story, Nick is going to lead us on.
This is more great news from the great and all-powerful Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He wants to build a tunnel under the 401 and buy back the 407. So for people who don't know this, the 401 is the busiest highway in North America around the GTA, and it kind of spans from Windsor all the way up to Quebec, I'm pretty sure. I'm familiar with the busiest parts of it because I used to live near Toronto, and let me tell you, it's not very fun riding on it, but there's this parallel-ish highway sort of for at least portions of it, which is the 407, which got sold to a private company in the 90s. And it's the traffic's not as bad on there. That's because there's a toll, right? So he's talking about buying this back and building a tunnel under the 401. Now, before we get too deep into this, I think this is one of those bait and switch type of things, that anchor price. He's showing, hey, look, we could build a tunnel under the 401. It's only going to cost how many billions of dollars and how many years to build? And then just say, hey, how about we just buy the 407 back instead? So it looks like this kind of deal. That's kind of the framing I think he's doing this thing here. I don't know. It seems a bit suspicious, but either way, I think this is a terrible idea. Let me just say, I've had arguments with this already. About this online with people about buying the 407. People who are saying this is a great idea. We should buy back the 407. And let me tell you why we shouldn't do this. At least not we. I don't live in Ontario anymore, but maybe as Ontarians, it's not a good idea. This is effectively saying more lanes will solve traffic. That's exactly what you're saying. You're making it cheaper to drive. More people will drive. That's induced demand. You make it cheaper, whether it comes to time or the actual money you pay, more people will drive, and traffic will be just as worse as it was before the 407 became free to ride on. That's it. Anyway, that's my piece. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that the 407 has less traffic is because it's a toll road.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly the opposite of what's happening in New York. And
right.
We'll talk about that. But you make it pricier to drive, less people will drive, right?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Ethan.
No, I was also going to say, too, it's also a bypass of the main city as well, too. So if you're trying to avoid going into, downtown Toronto, then it's arguably the better option. But, I mean, when you are tolling people to ride on it, people are going to avoid it and instead choose the cheaper option of going through downtown adding more congestion to downtown.
Yeah, it's not cheaper for your sanity, but maybe for wallet. I know it's pretty expensive. I haven't driven on the 407 for a long time, but I remember it being somewhere around $30 if you didn't have one of those transponders. I don't know. Maybe Nicholas?
Yeah, I think I've got a bill. I think I still need to pay. I think it was around there, but it's amazing that that there even needs to be more lanes there at one of the points where it's one of the widest highways in the world. It's terrible.
It's incredible to see, because I visit Ontario almost every year, and I often fly into Pearson, and inevitably we drive down the 401 towards London and area to southern Ontario. And it's been crazy to see it change over the years, because every time I come, there's some development, and it seemed like, hey, like this last summer, I was like, it's done, like quote unquote done. But like near Toronto, there was like no construction, and it was so huge. I couldn't believe how wide this highway's gotten. It's unbelievable. But yeah, this is, at the end of the day, it's not a good idea. I know that, the premier and the government is investing in public transit in the area, but it's nowhere near what needs to be done to actually get people moving. That's it. Like the GO train, it works for certain people, but this needs to be way better. Like the fact that they canceled HSR across the province is just a travesty in this day and age.
And they're also actively trying to take away bike lanes from the downtown.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's going to speed up all the traffic. Don't you know, Nicholas?
It seems like, at least from our perspective, it's one bluster after another. And again, this is another thing where it seems like common sense, but it's just nonsense.
We have
just
to fight
another thing like that, just like the bike lanes, right?
We have to fight the bike mafia and actually widen our highways.
Yeah, the cabal. Yeah.
It's interesting because like we have to be investing in all of these things, but I'm wondering where you think didn't Justin Trudeau pay some lip service to a high-speed rail or a train, or do you think that went out the window at the same time he realized he didn't have re-election chances?
Yeah, no, that's out. That's gone.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. It was a valiant thing thrown at the wall as a maybe. Do you think this could make me popular again? But
yeah, I mean, this is like an aside, but the fact that we have an impending federal conservative government coming in October at the latest, what usually happens in Ontario is it flips, right? I know Doug wanted to do this early election thing so that he could be fighting the whole, federal liberal thing, like what happened here in BC. We almost had a conservative government happening here in the province, but we just narrowly missed it. And I think a lot of that is because people were like, F Trudeau. So, it could be good for Ontario, in that respect. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting.
And I'll also say, like, there are different ways that the Conservative Party has said that they'd go about it, but they're not anti-housing and they're not necessarily anti-transit, right? Like it doesn't necessarily mean that all of these things that we want are dead.
No, but I don't think Pierre Poilievre is going to be a champion of high-speed rail. That's what I'm saying.
I don't know. Maybe he'll be converted. Maybe he'll be converted.
You know what? I will eat my own socks if that happens. But.
He'll take a trip to Japan and his eyes will be opened and he'll just be like, we got to have that stuff here.
Or he could take a trip to Houston.
Just like Doug Ford.
Yeah. Yeah. So
early eyes opened.
You never know. Urbanism is for everyone. Good transportation is for everyone.
And it's fiscally conservative, guys. Come on.
It literally is. The cheapest way to move people is on foot, and then cycling, and then it's transit, and then it's cars. Cars are easily the most expensive way for both you as an individual to get around, but also as a burden shared by everyone else. It's expensive. It's especially this project is $55 billion, $1 billion per kilometer to dig that tunnel, I guess. So, and
oh my God.
And the person they talked to, Dr. Shoshana Sachs, an associate professor at the University of Toronto's Department of Civil and Mineral Engineering, said it could certainly be more than that. Yeah, and any massive project is going to have massive cost overruns. So yeah, we
I-
really we got to think about this.
Like we could actually spend that money. No, this would most likely happen. We spend all of that money, build this beautiful tunnel, right? We double the capacity of the 401, and traffic's just as bad as it was before. Oh no.
Which
What happened?
which it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, and also, if you have if you make the most massive highway even more massive, like you got to realize that has maintenance costs associated with it. Like you get to stand up there and cut the pretty ribbon and say like, look at this amazing thing that we did. And for a few days, people will be like, wow, that was awesome. But the next generation is going to curse your name because you left them saddled with this insane amount of maintenance costs that you got to keep up, right?
I mean, if you look at the Big Dig in Boston,
Yeah.
at least that provided some, I guess, urban quality to the environment there.
Yeah.
I mean, this would just be stacking a highway on top of another highway. It's totally useless.
Yeah, that's totally
Yeah.
true. Like there's been tons of projects like that. I'm thinking of like tunnel tops in San Francisco, the same thing. Like they buried the highway by the seaside and now there's a beautiful park on top of it with access to the waterfront.
Yeah. There's something people can actually enjoy.
Yeah.
And yeah, despite it being incredibly expensive.
This is just more lanes, bro, but like underground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of tolls and such, Ethan, take us away with your story.
Yes. So, as we know about tolls, there was actually a very controversial toll, to say the least, implemented in North America's, I believe, second largest city on January 5th. So, New York City has its wonderful congestion pricing scheme implemented, which is awesome. $9 to enter this whole zone during the peak hours, $2.75 during off-peak hours. Really good way to ensure that people aren't driving a car into one of the most congested areas in the entire country. Now, it hasn't been super popular with a lot of people commuting from New Jersey, but it's been around for about a week, with about 5 days worth of weekday data and about 2 days worth of weekend data. And the data has already started suggesting that, can you believe this, guys? Driving into the congestion zone has dropped. And because of that, transit speeds have gone up. Bus speeds have actually gone up considerably. We actually do have some data on this. I'll actually share this right here. But the MTA has published some of its first takeaways from congestion pricing. So
It's incredible to see. Yeah, I've been seeing mixed reactions to it. You know, some people saying, hey, look at this. Immediately, there's been a traffic reduction. The streets are quieter. There's less pollution. It's better to bike on. Transit's better. But I also seen the other side where some people are saying it's basically the same. But at the end of the day, even if that's the case, at least they're getting all of this funding for MTA to make the transit better in New York City.
Yeah, it comes for a lot of different projects. There's, I believe, like over 50 projects that are getting funded from this, from new buses to bus station rehabs to accessibility improvements for the subway to the Second Avenue subway extension. Frequency improvements on the subway as well are coming too with new signaling. So these funds for congestion pricing are huge, but the first week's data shows that, I mean, it's definitely making a difference in some respect, especially with traffic through the congestion zone.
That's incredible. That's great to see. Wow. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how, if like the traffic rebounds, if people are going to start realizing, hey, this is actually saving me a lot of time, and then there's going to find a new equilibrium. I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was before this was implemented, but you know, it could rebound in a certain sense. People realizing that that time is worth it. It's worth paying that $9 to go into the zone every day if it's saving them, you know, however many minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like it's a more comfortable situation. And Dennis Agar shared the New York Times article. And
Dennis Agar.
He quoted it here. Here's from the article. And some drivers admitted they have been forced to change their tune. On Tuesday, a social media user named Ali Lyles posted a video on TikTok in which he compared being charged a toll as as he crossed a bridge to being robbed without a gun. Just a short time later, he posted another video acknowledging that he had saved half an hour from his commute. There wasn't no traffic, bruh, he said. I might actually like congestion pricing.
Honestly, that's $9 for half an hour. Sign me up, man. Like,
yeah, that's a huge gain in terms of your own free time. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a great commute. It's 15 minutes each way on my bicycle. It's amazing. But like, I've commuted quite far in the past with certain jobs. And let me tell you,
Yeah.
I'd spend some money if I can make it shorter. Like, holy, $9 isn't a bad deal. I understand there's an argument for people who are working class. They have to get their car into Manhattan. I feel like that's a really far edge case for a lot of people, but it seemed to be a big argument against congestion pricing, which is unfortunate. But I feel like the benefits you can't deny. It's making a shift, a cultural shift, like we said, shifting that Overton window, but not only that, actually shifting the way we can move around our cities. And it's the same thing as why we don't increase the gas tax in the United States, because it's politically unfeasible. Instead, we just keep digging this hole deeper and deeper until we can't fucking get out of it. Now we're here. Here we are.
yeah. Well, also on top of it too is that when you were mentioning that working class person getting into Manhattan or Lower Manhattan by car, we have this wonderful chart that says that only 11% of commuters took their car
There you go.
into Manhattan.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's already somewhere where people take a lot of transit, right?
Yeah,
like, it's So, and they actually have good transit, right? Like if you did this in most North American cities, it'd be a disaster because people wouldn't have another option of how to get to those places. But somewhere like Manhattan, it's kind of a no-brainer. Most people already take transit. Transit was already underfunded.
Yeah.
And the traffic was already horrendous to the point where you're thinking like, okay, what can we do about this? Because there was no way to add more lanes, right? Unless you start knocking down whole blocks. But I want to share another excerpt from the New York Times article. Mark Jacoby, 64 years old, had a similar experience. He drives from the West Village to the Bronx or Westchester 4 to 5 times a week to teach music to people with special needs. He drives instead of taking public transportation because, he said, he carries so much equipment: guitars, puppets, percussion instruments, flutes, whistles, sometimes toys. Before now, Mr. Jacoby had only negative impressions of congestion pricing. If someone asked me 2 weeks ago, I would say this is going to be a disaster, he said. But I was wrong about that, and I'm happy to admit that I was wrong. So yeah, it's interesting to see, like, okay, some of these things that we worry about, it's actually has the potential to be awesome and actually benefit us personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been cool to see the reactions. There was a recent episode from the War on Cars podcast where Doug went out onto the streets, I think on the first day of congestion pricing, and talked to people. They knew he was going to be there, so it was mostly advocates, like even Miser, who was a previous guest of the show, talked for quite a bit with Doug about the situation, which was really cool. But I'm interested to see how that changes, right? What do they call it? The Valley of Doom. It's right before it's implemented. You know, the approval rating's super low, but then afterwards it's kind of like, okay, people get used to it. They see the benefits and it's fine. It's a non-issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's as long as it's actually like a decent thing and implemented well, which by all reports, it seems like this is actually going pretty well. Should we get into the interview portion? I know, Nick, you have more things we wanted to ask Nicholas here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is first coming from your Instagram page, because I did mention it earlier. And there's an image of you here talking to some folks and pointing at things. I'm going to pop it up here. So it's you with a bunch of people surrounded, and you're, I love the caption though. It says, "I'm in my happy place. Pictures of me pointing at things." And it's thanks for the opportunity at Jane's Walk, Windsor, Essex, to get to talk about architecture and urbanism in downtown Windsor. So one of the things you also mentioned in here is the failures, missed opportunities, and a whole lot of potential. And that's something that I think about a lot right there. And that's what I want to ask you about, because I find potential is something that we have in so many North American cities right now. Some maybe lost causes in certain ways, like no offense for those in the chat or listening right now, but some of those Sun Belt cities, whenever I go down there, I'm like, what can be done about this? I don't know. Sorry, but a lot of older cities, especially on the East Coast, tons of potential. So what do you see in potential in Windsor and Detroit?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and I really see a lot of potential here. The bones of the city are really good. I know we had Jeff Speck come down and speak to a really good crowd about basically what he saw, and there's a lot of this idea about block sizes. And he was comparing, Houston to a European city, and he looked at Windsor, and really we do have a lot of really good bones to the city. There's been some historic issues. We've demolished a lot of our historic buildings, unfortunately, but we do have a good crop of them as well. We have a lot of missing middle housing in the downtown core, which is really, really great. And then we do have this incredible partnership with Detroit. Being a border city, we do see a lot of flux between these two cities. We are tied directly to the automotive industry, which is not necessarily a good thing. When they're doing well, we do well. When they're not doing well, we don't do too well. But there's a lot of potential here. We have University of Windsor, that's an incredible research institute. We have a lot of people that have been in Windsor their entire lives and really are passionate about making things better. We have a lot of groups, a lot of nonprofits that are helping. There's a lot of issues, but there's a lot that can be done and turned around, given the right political will. It's something that we do get stopped a lot of times with politics, but I think having the people there that are really, really pushing for change is what's going to push that over into the potential to the realization point.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So do you see any of the people in charge actually taking that potential?
It's tough. It's not something that I see in this current administration. There are a couple of counselors that are trying their best to be in progressive positions, but ultimately the decisions always come down to it being a car city, and those are the things that drive us. We're currently dealing with a $1.4 million budget deficit, or a budget issue with taking money away from transit during a time where our transit is actually growing exponentially. We have a lot of newcomers to Canada in Windsor, a lot of people that don't have vehicles their own, and at a time where we should be investing in transit, we're taking money away from it. It's a tough political battle, but I think the real kind of strides that are taken are from the grassroots movements.
That's fantastic. Yeah, obviously you've got your fingers in those different pies. We talked a bit about it before the show, but can you talk about your favorite ones that you're involved with?
Yeah. So, I'm on a board of directors for Bike Windsor Essex. Bike Windsor Essex is a group of people that are very passionate about active transportation throughout the city of Windsor. We're really trying to push the active transportation master plan, who our current administration has said is merely aspirational. We want to push them to make it happen rather than it being a pipe dream. So that's been a really good group. Activate Transit Windsor is another one that's on the opposite side, is they're trying to push for public transportation. So we've got the active transportation and the public transportation. Those are really really great groups with a lot of dedicated people trying really hard to force the issue. And then I'm just getting involved with Strong Towns Detroit, which is a really new group in Detroit that I mean, I'm sure a lot of you and your listeners are know about Strong Towns, but we're trying to get land use policy developed for areas in Detroit. Yeah, there's a lot of really good groups, a lot of good people trying to make things happen. We just need a little bit more from our politicians.
Mm-hmm. That's like the tipping point, right? Is really getting them involved. And like we mentioned before the show too, is how much it's changed in Detroit, right? It's known as Motor City. It's been hollowed out by the car, but I like to think that it's the phoenix rising from the ashes. But you got to stoke those ashes to actually get it there. It's not like it's going to happen. It's not inevitable, but it's cool to see the changes that are happening there. And you've been a part of that. We got a few questions from the listeners here, but I want to ask you about something in particular that we've talked about in the past, which is a food desert.
Yeah.
So can you first talk about what a food desert is for those who might not know, and your involvement in helping closing those gaps?
Yeah. So Detroit and a lot of cities throughout North America have what's called food deserts, and they're areas where fresh produce, fresh food are you have to travel a very large distance to get to anything sort of a quality of food, fresh produce or meals. You know, if you're living in a city where that's not the case, you can't even imagine that that's the lives that a lot of people in North America deal with at any given time. I mean, where I grew up, there was fresh produce stands, you know, pretty much at every corner. You know, farmers all over the place, but there's lots of cities where, you know, there's nothing even close to available. And one of the areas in Detroit that I had the pleasure of working on a project for was an area that is close to actually where the new Gordie Howe Bridge, the new crossing is going to be, which is pretty cool. It's going to have some bike lanes on it, but that area has been historically a massive food desert. And the client that we were working with, he actually said that most of his meals when he grew up were from the local gas station. So that was the closest that he could get to get actual food. So one of the projects that was there was a car wash that was disused and abandoned. We were turning it into a small grocer. So basically, keep your staples in coolers, and anybody in the neighborhood could just at least have a spot where they could walk to. They could get a head of lettuce, some tomatoes, at least have something that isn't from a bag from a gas station.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so cool. So you said that's near the Gordie Howe Bridge where that's being built. That's kind of on the western side of Detroit.
Yeah.
I want to see what this looks like.
I've
been looking for it while you're speaking, but I can't seem to find it.
I don't know if it's actually out in public yet, but I'll send you some pictures.
Yeah, we'll share it in the details of the show afterwards.
Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, we got some questions from our listeners here in the live chat. This one's from Jen. First one. Can you share an example of how the existing dynamics and history of a neighborhood impacted one of your projects?
Yeah. I mean, so that one in particular that I just spoke about was, the food desert really kind of pushed the design of that. And, as architects, you really do try to use the historic context and the scale, all sorts of things for any of your projects. One of the projects I'm working on right now in Detroit is a spa, and it's in a early 1900s abandoned building. And what the idea is that a lot of the people in the area, are very hard workers, and they don't have a chance to really get to places where they are able to just relax. So this is a project to give back to the people. So we really tried to take each individual project and curtail them to the situation, the function, and the aesthetics of the area, and that was a really interesting one.
That's fantastic. And we got another one from Skitched here. What's it like living so close to an international border?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a dual citizen, so it makes it a little bit easier for me. It's not a huge deal. I go under the tunnel into Detroit from Windsor pretty much every day, and it takes me about 15 minutes. Unfortunately, one of the best ways to get from Windsor to Detroit right now is on the cutting blocks by our current administration. They're looking at canceling the tunnel bus, which is I think pretty awful. There's a lot of people that use it as the only way to get from Windsor to Detroit. So that's a really big shame. It's one of the only examples of North America of cross-border transit, which is really interesting. Yeah. And I wish that we could keep it going. I know Activate Transit Windsor is running a petition right now, so I could share that with you guys. But it's interesting. I mean, one of my favorite things is looking across the river into Detroit. I think it's one of the nicest views around. But we learn a lot from each other, Detroit and Windsor. I like being so close to there.
Yeah, it's a nice skyline to look at. It's fantastic. But the tunnel bus, that's basically if you want to bring your bike over, you can't bike over the Ambassador Bridge. Can you take it on the bus? Yeah.
So right? There's a rack at the front, and it's a little bit hairy because if multiple people bike over and you get to the bus and there's no space on the bike rack, it's a little bit tricky, but it's the only way. It's really the only way to get over there.
They give you a rope to tie to the back of the bus and you just hang on to your bike.
Yeah,
I do remember hearing that there is going to be a multi-use path on the Gordie Howe Bridge.
Yeah. So Bike Windsor Essex, our exec, Lori Newton, was involved directly with getting that bike lane on the bridge. So I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really cool to be able to bike over. It'll also connect to the Joe Louis Greenway, which is this giant, I think it's 30-something mile loop in Detroit that's going to connect directly to the bridge. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
It's going to be massive. It's crazy. I rode some of it. A lot of it's not connected completely yet, but I was just, blown away by some of it. It's fantastic to see, old rail beds being used as multi-use pathways. Like the DeQuinder Cut was amazing. Incredible connections, but even along the lakeside is really nice. Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's building up. But somebody just moved there recently, wasn't it? Propel, maybe YouTube channel Propel. They've got like some workshop going over there where they're like working on micromobility and stuff near the old train station, Michigan Central, I think.
Yeah, in the new lab. Yeah. There's all sorts of that whole place is just amazing. You throw $1 billion into a building and it turns out pretty cool.
So you can get this cool building for $1 billion or 1 kilometer of a tunnel under the 401.
Yeah.
Tough choice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've never been to the area, but it is interesting hearing you talk about it because it's like one metro area, but it's international. It's an international metro area. And so that bus connection, that transit connection is that's critical, especially like if the only other option is to get around by car.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many close knit like the history here is there's a lot of people that have direct family, and the only way that they can go see their family is that bus.
Right.
If you're in a position where you can't drive for whatever reason, if you're have mobility issues, the only way that you can get over there is by that bus. And I think it's a really, really bad decision by our council to even think about chopping that off. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Definitely.
hopefully you guys can manage to hang on to that. Um, should we get into the rest of the listener mail, or do we have any more questions to badger Nicholas with?
That's the only questions we have. If there's anything else you want to share before we get into these questions, please feel free.
no, I think that's it.
Awesome. Groovy.
Sweet.
Groovy. Ethan, do you want to take this first question?
Yes, let me take this first question. So this comes from our listener, Mr. Bifflechips here.
I believe it's Mrs. Mrs.
Or Mrs.
Mrs.
Biff. Oh my
Chips.
goodness. I need to get new glasses. And they said, imagine the power if the bike lane creation bike was fitted with the bike lane blocker melter.
Yeah. Is that the thing that New York, was it New York that did that?
Oh, the bike lane
The
destruction
Yeah.
ads. Yeah, that or bus lane destruction ad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, let me see if I can find that real quick. But
It's funny.
MTA made these wonderful GIFs, and they keep making more of them, and they're wonderful. But it is basically a bus lane eradication thing to promote their bus lane enforcement cameras that they put on their buses.
I have not seen this. I want to see this. Yeah, that's funny because I was just reading Carmageddon by Daniel Knowles, and he mentioned he wished that buses didn't have just cameras, but they had rocket launchers to just blow cars out of the bus lane. It's like, yeah, that's an idea. It's a bit extreme, but I think some people would be here for that.
I remember Robot Wars, when the one that had the giant thing that would flick the robot up.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Oh, what was that show called? Oh my God, that was. Didn't it come back? I can't
Robot
remember.
Wars?
Yeah, there's
Robot Wars. Is that it?
Yeah, that stuff's ongoing. Yeah. Well, that's a good GIF. I'll make it bigger when I put the show
Lovely.
show up. Yeah. I'll make it more visible instead of making it all small on the screen there.
I'll just send it to you.
Another one, Nick.
We got another question here.
Yeah,
this is coming.
we've got some listener mail
from John Potter. Hi, Radio Free Urbanism. I live in Tacoma, Washington, which is about 30 miles from Seattle. We have a project for a new link extension for 2 routes. One is for the Tacoma link, expanding from our downtown from St. Joseph Hospital all the way down to South 19th Street to Tacoma Community College. The other expansion is from the Seattle link from Angle Lake to Tacoma Dome. That's about 17.5 miles of new light rail. Right now, only 7.8 miles is currently in construction from Angle Lake to Federal Way. The expansion from there to Tacoma Dome station is under environmental review, but will connect Seattle and Tacoma via link, so you'll be able to ride from UW Tacoma to UW Seattle only using light rail. That is pretty nice. Ethan, why have we not been updated on this?
Well, actually, yeah, it's Seattle's been doing some pretty good work with their light rail. They have a really exciting extension that's coming up. Not quite to Tacoma yet, but the east side of the city, or the east suburbs of Bellevue and what's the other one I'm trying to think of? Bellevue and no, it's not that one.
the other ones.
The other ones.
Yeah,
I
Redmond.
can't think of them right now. But
Skitch says Redmond.
Yeah, Redmond and Bellevue currently had the 2-line open up on the east side, but they're actually planning to. Well, they actually have built it, and they're planning to open it this year. Is an extension to connect that line to downtown Seattle over Mercer Island and Lake Washington.
Nice. Yeah, this is great. This is great listener mail because we don't hear about everything, and we also don't it's nice to get the details of what's under environmental review, what's currently under construction, what's going on with all of these different projects. So if you have something in your area that you want to quickly mention to us, just in 3 paragraphs, just like John did here, send us an email at radiofreeurbanism@gmail.com. The odd time that we do get emails like this, we like sharing them because it broadens our scope a little bit, right?
It does.
We're the 3 of us are interested in particular things, and our guests are interested in particular things. So when we get out of that field a little bit more and see what else is happening in other cities, It's fantastic. So thanks for the email, John. Do we want to get on to this last listener mail? This is from Jen Hall. It's a classic Jen Hall question.
We were afraid we didn't have one from Jen today.
Yeah, I was actually I was entering a state, quite the state, actually. I was trying to figure out which adjective I wanted, but I feel like just state. Imagine whatever state you like to imagine.
Whatever state popped into your head, that was the state
that was the state I was going to be in. Well, yeah, this comes from Jen Hall, friend of the show, former guest, regular listener and supporter. And she says, if you could hire an architect to reimagine a public building in your city, what would you choose? That's a great question. Nicholas, have you thought about this sort of question? Like, do you have, as an architect, like, do you have something that you dream of working on?
Yeah, and I guess it would depend on what the reasoning behind the redevelopment was, and if it was purely selfish and I just wanted my favorite architect to do it because it would look cool, then I'd probably pick Stephen Hall, architect. He's got some cool stuff. But if it was something like, if I wanted to make it, the best use of the public space as I possibly could, I don't know, maybe Opticos Design is from California. They did the manual for missing middle housing. They do some really, really cool urbanist, small city, small developments. They do some cool stuff. Or Lacaton and Vassal. They won the Pritzker Prize in 2021. Their work is all about not building anything. They want us to use our existing infrastructure and our existing spaces to redesign things. So, that's some options.
Yeah. Are there any particular specific buildings that come to mind? Do you think that could use some rejiggering?
I mean, a lot of buildings in downtown Windsor. I think our vacancy rate is, I want to say it's in the 60%, something like that. So there's a lot of empty buildings that, and a lot of people need housing. So there's a lot that could be picked up from in Windsor. Detroit's got some really amazing architecture from the 1920s. Some of the best Art Deco architecture in the entire world. It's that's a tough one.
Honestly, it's not something I think about a lot. So I'm kind of racking my brain to try to think of something here in Vancouver that might be redesigned. I don't even know.
I came up with something in Calgary. I was kind of like, the Calgary Tower, like what would be an interesting twist on the Calgary Tower? But then as Nicholas was talking, he mentioned he mentioned spaces and like the way that we design spaces. And so I was thinking the old Eau Claire Mall. So this mall is being torn down. This is where the Green Line will eventually come through and then come up and hop on Center Street there. Eventually, the Green Line. It's been a saga. I think this would be kind of an interesting space that would be great if we actually did something with it. I don't think it should just be a train station. I think it would be great to actually activate it with something else. The mall was very, very dead before it closed down, but it also was this icon of Calgary and of the Eau Claire area. And so I think it'd be interesting to kind of take some of those characteristics of the old mall and mix it in with like what we're gonna do new here, right? It's kind of an interesting place, right? Like I remember coming here as a kid and thinking it was so strange and different. And this is actually where Canadian Blood Services used to be before they moved, before the shutting down of the mall. But yeah, it's like it was already dead. It was already a dead mall, but it's just got this just different character to it. And I think it would be cool to incorporate that in some way into the design of the area around the station and the characteristics of it. So I
It's
guess
got.
that's
Sorry.
what I'll say.
I was gonna say it's got a very similar vibe to another like dead mall that's been destroyed, but it was kind of more like dead mall lifestyle downtown, and it was called the Landing in Jacksonville, Florida, and it really had this kind of like over the top, very like expressive '90s, '80s design to it, and just kind of never took off.
Yeah.
And those are really big pieces of real estate too. You can do a lot with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that would be a really unique place, especially it's right by Prince's Island Park, which is also like an iconic and very popular place in Calgary. So yeah, I think that would be interesting. Have you thought of something yet, Nick?
I've got something.
You got something?
Yeah, something's popped into my brain here. And let me make sure I'm not going to dox myself again. Looks all right. This here is Science World, and if you know Vancouver, if you've seen a picture, you've probably seen it. It was built for the expo way back in, I think, the 80s or 60s. I don't remember, somewhere in that area before I was born. But it's this big ball that lights up at night. Now it's a science center where a lot of kids go, families go to go explore some fun science things. But that whole area, especially the park kind of around here, is going to be basically demolished and disappeared. What I would like was for somebody to come, whether that's some kind of urban planner or architect, and reimagine this whole space here and keep it alive, because it's such a wonderful place for people to come and sit and hang out with their families or with their loved ones or with friends and just enjoy the sunset. It's a great place in the city, and I'll be sad to see it go.
And tied to education too that's like a perfect spot for urbanism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right by a SkyTrain station too. It's a wonderful spot.
Yeah, it has the transit station. It has great sunsets. It has like
the bike lanes everywhere too.
Bike lanes.
Yeah.
That is a really, really great spot. Jen in the comments says, I love science centers. Great choice. Yeah, science centers are like a cool place. I love museums, like things like that, like those institutional things, especially when they're great for people of all ages. It creates a great place for the community to hang out.
They're great little cultural hubs that kind of tie a city together.
Yeah, exactly. Ethan, what about you? What do you?
So I'm just gonna say my favorite one of my favorite architects here. I'm honestly kind of a brutalism fan. I know it's kind of a controversial design style. So I mean, if Portland had one building from any architect, I wish it had some sort of Bertrand Goldberg building. I'm a real fan of his design. Grew up in the Chicago area, Marina City, River City. There's quite a few different designs by him there. But there's a space in Portland that I think could really use an amazing redevelopment. It's a large space. It's right in the heart of Old Town, which is an area that needs redevelopment. And it is the former post office here that is right in the heart of Old Town, Chinatown right here, right next to our Union Station. So this whole area, this postal sorting center, is no longer used by USPS. They've relocated all their facilities from here, and now it just sits abandoned right here. And this is right near some of the best real estate in the city. You've got the train station right here. You've got Max Lines over here. You've got the streetcar over here in the Pearl District in this area. That's a really, really lovely neighborhood just to exist in. But there's this huge gap right in between Old Town and the Pearl, and I think it would be a really good place to maybe fit some sort of new cultural center, a park, and some mixed-use development. You have a lot of space. This is probably about 6 city blocks here that you could do some serious redevelopment of, and preferably something, that really takes the priority away from cars here, because it's existed long enough without having vehicles going down the street. So you could make this a whole car-free area with mixed-use development, maybe a new museum here, because Portland kind of lacks some of them. But I think it could be a really great space to turn into kind of a centerpiece of the city.
I mean, that could be totally city changing. I mean, that's a huge project.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. And a project like this would be something that it's not out of the scope that the city could do, but they have this land that they could work with. And it's really something that is like truly potentially city changing right here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. While we're talking about these big city building, city defining projects, we should give a shout out to our friends at the Rio Grande Plan. It's been a while since we've mentioned them on the show, but yeah, I'm really excited about what they're working on down in Utah. It is one of those kind of big projects. They'd like to see something happen with the Rio Grande station and improve transit across Utah as well through this improvement. So yeah, check out the Rio Grande Plan. And Jen, great question. This was such a good question. It really got our wheels turning. And ask it again and again and again, because
The
as
same one every week.
literally the same one every week. As,
Yeah.
as we got talking, I'm like, and there's this one, and I'm like, and this one. That's an interesting place that we could talk about. And it would be interesting to just like compile a list of different places in cities. So maybe as a call for comments this week from people, if you want to leave a comment on the YouTube channel or send us an email at radiofreeurbanism@gmail.com, let us know where there's somewhere in your city that you think would have a great opportunity, a great candidate for like an interesting redesign, and maybe tell us some of the elements that you would think could potentially go into this placemaking architecture project in your city. But yeah, this was a delight. This was fun. Does anybody have anything they want to say as we come to a close?
I mean, Alex. I got a wug mug. It's been
You
a
got-
long time. It's
give
a
us-
little one, but
It's
I got
been a
one.
minute.
It's
Give
been
us a
while.
wug mug.
All right, guys, I got something. You know what grinds my gears? You know what grinds my gears is cheaters, okay? I'm sick and tired of cheaters. You know when you're biking to work and some guy comes along on his e-bike and he just flies past you, or on his e-scooter or his electric unicycle? Cheaters. No, guys, I'm just kidding.
You better be kidding.
Yeah.
I got a colleague, and I love him to death, but we have these like friendly jabs at each other about how we get to work. And he's what you might call a classic mammal, you know? He bikes to work on occasion. He gets all dressed up in his Lycra on his road bike, and that's how he occasionally gets to work. But I haven't seen him on his bike in a while. So I asked him the other day, I said, "Hey, you haven't been on your bike in a while." He's like, "Oh, you can't talk to me about that." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You've only just started biking." I was like, "Doug, I'm a fair weather cyclist. You know, I bike when I feel like it. Otherwise, I get on my electric scooter." He's like, "That's cheating." I was like, "You can get on an e-bike." He's like, "No, it's cheating." I was like, "No, it's not. Still got to work." I was like, "Doug, sorry, I'm not going to say his name on here. I almost said it. How did you get to work today?" And he goes, "Oh, that doesn't matter." I was like, "I know how you got to work. You drove in your convertible. Is that not cheating? Come on. I'm just getting to work." And I think it comes from a fundamental misunderstanding about, you know, where I come from on this. You know, somebody who's a cyclist, it's about putting in the effort, and that's kind of their goal. Where from my perspective, it's about how can I get to work without dragging my car out of my garage. And I think that's where that fundamental misunderstanding comes from. And I had to think about that for a little while. But guys, it's not cheating. If you get to where you're going, where you want to go, and you enjoy it, I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to judge you. Do what you want, but don't judge me if I get on my electric scooter. Okay?
Yeah. I like that.
Is that fair?
I think
fair.
think that's fair. I think we talk about this all the time on the show, but we need multiple options for getting around to different places.
Absolutely.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, some places we fly to, some places we drive, some places we take the train, some places we bike, right? Like some places we just walk. If it's a cafe at the end of my street, I'm not going to drive there because it's just 5 houses down, right?
And every destination we go to by driving. And then if there's no parking, we complain about there's not enough damn parking in this city.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean,
And
there's
I think
always
the more
something.
options, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the more
right?
options for parking.
It's also
Yeah.
redundancy in systems, right? Like, especially we see like fires in California and stuff. Like, you know, people have to get to safety, and the more options that we have to do that, the better. I think, at least. But yeah, this has been fun. Thanks for joining us, Nicholas. Do you want to share your thoughts? Where can we find you? Where can we send people?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, either my personal or my Atelier Lamoureux page. I'm on LinkedIn. I can send my email. I'm a huge proponent of mentorship. So if there's any young architects out there looking for mentors, let me know.
That is fantastic. Yeah, I've actually I have an architect friend. I'll share this show with him and tell him he should chat with you. He's just doing his I think his first internship or something. But yeah, he's super stoked about the profession and the impact that he can make through that. And I think that's important to remember. Everybody has a different area where they might be able to help make their city a better place. Yeah, Ethan, do you want to wrap us up here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Nick, where can the good people find you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, or Blue Sky at Nick the Door. My name's Nick Laporte. And Alex, how about you?
You can find me at Humane Cities on Instagram and YouTube, and Alex Williams YYC in pretty much every place. Ethan, where can we find you?
The good people can find me on pretty much every platform at Climate and Transit. Everyone, thank you so much for joining in for this wonderful show. Nicholas, thank you so much for being a guest on this show. Always awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, or listening. And as always, train good, car bad.
Two wheels good.
And feet first.